All right, everyone. So we have a number of ingredients here. Um, Vegetable broth, Simple Truth Organic. It's a really good Kroger brand. I tend to use that kind of broth. I'm about to use perhaps this container and then a half of another one, but I might just use one container. We'll have to see. Potato, yellow onion, carrot, of course, one mini sweet pepper. And then this little herb blend is Italian parsley, rosemary, and thyme. Some green onion, mainly the green part on top, but I'm chop probably about two of those strands. Um, Chop them really fine so that they dissolve within the soup mix. And a turnip. I've been experimenting with turnips for quite a while, and they are the starchiest and also the thickest vegetable that I've used. So they take a little bit longer to boil, but all of this should cook down to a good soup. So let's go ahead and cut all this stuff up. So usually when you get to the bigger parts of the carrot, you might want to cut the carrot in half and, chop it in more halves than complete wholes. Because if you have something like this that gets thicker than this and wider than this, then it's not really good for a soup. So you might want to be economical about how you cut the carrot. So turnips are really hard to cut. They're very dense. So it's kind of okay if you feel like there's a lot of tension, that's good. If a turnip gets too soft and you don't feel a lot of tension, then that's when you shouldn't use a turnip. But I'm gonna cut this up kind of like how I would cut up a potato. So when cutting up a green onion, you want to have the idea that it's going to dissolve. So I'm going to cut the leafy part, very fine, and it is going to boil down. You're going to have a little bit of, leafy parts kind of floating, kind of like miso soup, where it's still there, but it's not really, it doesn't have any substance to it. It's more just floating there. It feels like part of the soup. That's what I'm gonna do with these few strands of green onion. Notice the size of the pieces of green onion, and the turnip is in the size that you usually cut a potato for soup. I actually might not add the potato because I have a lot of starchiness with the turnip, but we'll see what everything looks like when I cut up all the ingredients, and we'll decide what goes into the soup. So the flesh of the one sweet pepper that I use, now keep in mind that when you cut up everything, it becomes more material, if that makes any sense. It starts to feel like more than it, did when it was like whole ingredients. So the mini sweet pepper is gonna cook down. It's gonna dissolve very much. You wanna chop the onion fine, so that whatever is left, it's actually going to, it's gonna be easier to, kind of like sip as a soup, but it will also cook down. And the chunky parts are always gonna be, something like a starch, like a turnip or a carrot. So when you cut up herbs like thyme, Italian parsley, and rosemary, they kind of like fling themselves everywhere. You usually don't want a whole lot. I probably threw away about 2/3 of what I had, but what is left is going to add a lot of spice to it. You kind of want to get rid of these stems. So I cut up a lot of this, and then I kind of like shredded it with my hands a little bit. It's not going to cut up as well as some of these other vegetables that we have, these herbs. Rosemary is especially resistant to being cut up. It kind of just wants to shred and fling itself everywhere, as well as thyme. Italian parsley operates the best when cutting up, but that is the amount we're going to use. But once again, I cleaned up a lot of this stuff, but just kind of flings itself everywhere when you try to cut it up. So keep in mind that you might have to tear with your hands, and try not to use too much of what you have, because these herbs will add a lot of flavor just with, 1/3 of the amount that I showed you, but even smaller amounts. So I've decided to definitely not use a potato because I have enough ingredients here with the amount of broth that I have in this pot. So I'm going to go ahead and put it around just above medium. And then I'll turn it down after I add everything. Well, after it starts boiling, I add everything. Then I'm actually going to turn down the heat, but just above medium is where I'm going to put it at. We're in the pantry. Now let's see if we can talk about some spices here. So garlic salt, this is not usually the garlic salt that I use, but I use garlic salt in general quite a bit. This is once again not the lemon pepper that I use, but I use lemon pepper quite a bit. Cumin, this is more for like Hispanic dishes. You know, even like vegan taco meat that I prepare quite a bit, you know, by Gardein or Morningstar Farms, something like that. I will still use the same spice that is cumin to prepare the fake meat. Sunshine spice, really good substitute for lemon pepper if you want to, you know, make a soup, or this is really good for grilling as well. You know, even for vegan grilling, if you're grilling vegetables. A lot of stuff that says like meat on it is actually really good on vegetables as well. I've noticed that in branding, putting meat on something tends to sell better. But don't think that you're confined to something that doesn't say meat on it. Texas salt, this is very good for Hispanic, you know, cooking once again. If it's more spicy Mexican soup or something like that, or you want to prepare vegetables in a similar way that you prepare like Mexican barbecue, Texas salt is really good as well. Parmesan garlic, black pepper trail. This is a little bit adventurous. The Parmesan, I'm not always liking or convinced of the Parmesan and a lot of just spicing vegetables in general. Sweet rub. Now, you'll notice that I use a lot of OBQ's spices. Really good stuff. But this sweet rub, it's really good for like beefless tips from Gardein. If you want them to be kind of like more of like a mesquite barbecue flavor, kind of fake beef. This is very good. This is an old staple. Tony's original Creole seasoning. This is good for soups. This is good for, honestly, all kinds of vegetables. It just depends on how spicy you want it. This Creole seasoning is not super spicy, but it is very tasty. At any rate, I think I've talked about spices enough. Let's go ahead and go back to what we were doing. I love this cut. What's up, Maxwell? How you doing, buddy? This stuff is not bad, actually. Modelo, chilada, lemon and salt. I don't drink a whole lot of beer. I drink a lot of vodka, but not a whole lot of beer. But this is actually really good. Also, just chilada in general. When there's some kind of tomato juice in beer, like it sounds really gross, but it's so tasty when Modelo does it, especially when it's a picante version of chilada. But even the lemon and salt version is pretty damn good. I'm a fan. That is about the heat that we want when we start adding ingredients. It's just starting to boil, a little bit of bubbles. Not quite boiling, but I'm gonna go ahead and add the ingredients now. Well, keep in mind that there's certain things that we want to cook down, like the green onions, the mini sweet pepper, the herbs, but we're gonna add it all at once. That's usually how I do things, but keep in mind that if you want things to not boil down and to stay their consistency, and they are of light flesh and consistency, they're very very soft, just know that you're going to want to add the starches first if you want them to not boil down or remain or You know, if you want them to remain soft, you're gonna want to add them later. Some of these spices get everywhere. Ah. But now that everything is in the pot, push everything down, kind of mix it around a bit. It's gonna be a very brothy kind of soup. It's a lot of liquid, not a whole lot of starch and material, but it's gonna be flavorful because of all the spices. And what I'm gonna be adding is, of course, one of my favorites, lemon pepper, and just actually a little bit of garlic salt, but mainly this is gonna be spiced by the herbs. This is gonna cook down, it's gonna make it tasty. And I'm gonna keep the heat up for probably about 10 minutes before turning it down. All right, we're about 15 minutes in and it is boiling very well, so we need to turn that down probably to about a 4. Medium's about halfway. I'm gonna add some spices here. You go ahead and awkwardly open up one of these can jar things. And then actually I'm not gonna add as much garlic salt as usual. I'm just gonna give it a little bit of a peppering. And maybe a bit more, but this is all I'm gonna use. Usually I do, 3 different spicings with that. And this lemon pepper. Break up the caking a little bit. Don't sling it everywhere like I just did. I'll probably do another spicing with this. Really good brand, by the way, Cowboy Spice. Keep that in mind. And then let's go ahead and stir. Very brothy soup, once again. Once this cooks down, it's gonna be very soupy, not chunky, for sure. And then I'm gonna let it sit for about another 10 to 15 minutes. All right, we are 12 seconds away from 15-minute mark. I did turn up the heat just a little bit from 4. But right now, I'm just gonna stir this. I can kind of tell the turnips are not quite cooked yet. Let me go ahead and open this and do another spicing. And just so you know, I like a lot of spice, but even this amount is not going to affect the soup as much as it might seem for how much I shook that little jar. But I'm gonna give it another 15 minutes and then do another spicing. You can kind of see that the green onions and the onions themselves are cooking down, which is exactly what I want. And the herbs are doing so as well, though the thyme and rosemary are pretty stubborn, but they are cooking down. All right, after another 15 minutes, we're starting to really see some dissolving here. It's exactly what we want to see, especially if you want to allow the turnips and carrots to be soft enough to eat. Which they are by now. But what I'm gonna do is do one more spicing. And give it about 10 more minutes, and then I'm gonna turn off this heat. Try and mix this up here. See the rosemary still being very stubborn. Thyme as well. But I'm gonna give it another 10 minutes, and then I'm gonna turn off the heat. So that is what we are going to do. Even more boiling down of the ingredients. And usually you want to stop this 10 to 15 minutes before I did, but I like to have things boil down and everything be soft in the soup. So I am just now turning off the heat and then moving this off of the heating source. And I'm gonna let it sit, cool down, coagulate. Ooh, that's not a very attractive word. Mix, and then give it a try. And I'll let you know how it is. All Alright, it's that time to sit for a little while. So we're gonna give this a try. The rosemary is always very stubborn, as well as the thyme, but it should add some really good flavor even though it didn't cook down. It's pretty good. Maybe a little bit too much sodium, a little bit too salty, but it's pretty good. Maybe a little bit less garlic salt, and the herbs are a little bit too much herb, just a little bit, but besides that, this is really tasty. Very brothy. At the same time, the turnip and the carrots are cooked down really well, and it was wise to cook it as long as I did, because the green onions also boiled down, as well as the mini sweet pepper that I added, just one mini sweet pepper. Overall, really good. I highly recommend this recipe. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and all of you, have a wonderful day.